there's the audience. And you're ready.
A man named Ansel Adams once said, "No man has the right to dictate what other men should perceive, create, or produce, but all should be encouraged to reveal themselves, their perceptions and emotions, and to build confidence in the creative spirit." And this leads me into my question today. Should school uniforms be made mandatory in every school? And my opinion is no. I'm going to back my opinion with 3 main points. My first, I'm going to give you some percentages of schools that issue school uniforms. My second will be some pros and cons in the public eye of having school uniforms, and my third will be why I feel that the school uniform law should be done away with. So on to my first point. The percentages of schools that issue school uniforms. Back in 2009, there was about 21% of schools in the United States that issued school uniforms. This was highly increased back from the early 2000s, 2001, 2002. It was at a very low 10 to 12%. It ranged from that in those 3 years. And back in 2007, there was 18% of schools in the United States that issued the school uniform rule. And now in 2011, there is about 24 to 25% of schools all over the United States that issue school uniforms in states such as Wyoming, California, parts of Florida, in the upper northeastern area as well too. And into my second point. Some of the pros and cons of school uniforms being enforced in public schooling and private schooling. One of the major debates that goes on about school uniforms would be that lots of gangs use clothes to identify, what gang they're in, the gang affiliation that they get involved in. So that's a pro. And my argument towards that would be, why not simply take these gang members and place them in an alternative learning environment where, none of the gang affiliation would be involved in schooling at all whatsoever. I mean, if you know that these students are a part of gang affiliated activities, you have a right to place them in an alternative learning education program. And, changing the way they dress isn't going to change the fact that they are still gang members, and it's not going to change the fact that there's still going to be violence. Whether they wear red, or they wear blue, or they wear their gang symbol on their shirt, or if the shirt's revealing enough to show the tattoos that they have for their gangs, Either way, gang affiliation isn't going to stop simply because you change how they dress or what they're wearing. And another argument that gets brought up, this is probably my favorite one simply because it comes from the Governor Edmund G. Brown of California, who is a very firm believer in issuing school uniforms, even though he hasn't made that an official law. But his opinion towards this was that school is the business of learning. That's what he calls it. School is the place where the next lawyers, bankers, CPAs, and doctors are given the fundamentals of working in this economy. And he thinks that one of the basis of our culture are, in the working world where lawyers and doctors are, is conservative dressing and dress code and things such as uniforms. So what's wrong with sending our kids the message that they're in the business of learning by forcing them to follow strict dress codes or wearing uniforms? This is coming directly from Governor Edmund G. Brown of California. And an argument came from a doctor in northern Wyoming. Her name is Tara McGinnis. She has a PhD in pediatric psychology and psychology as well. And her argument towards this, which I strongly agree with, is school is also the place where actors, writers, artists, politicians, inventors, designers, musicians are all trained as well. School uniform sends a clear and early life message to students that conformity is important and creativity is not as important. That authority is allowed to abuse its power and constrain our constitutional right to free speech and free expression. Students learn from uniforms that their individuality, their political opinion, and their religious rights are unimportant, and as their education, students are regularly suspended for non-compliance with following these dress code rules. And, simply being expelled or punished for not complying with the rules of dress code, they could be a brilliant student. So if Edmund G. Brown is going to argue that school is the business of learning, what's the use of expelling or punishing a kid for not compelling with the dress code when he's an excellent student anyways? So this leads me into my third point on my opinion of why I feel that the uniform law should be done away with. And my biggest argument would have to be self-expression. I'm a firm believer in everyone having the right to self-express themselves in any way that they feel necessary, especially through clothing. That's a big way that people express how they're feeling, what their style is, things of that sort. And also, children and teenagers, especially early, teens that are in their later teens, they don't need to conform to the people around them. We shouldn't have to dress the way that our friends dress and dress the way that boys dress when you're a female. I don't think that's fair necessarily. And not only that, but these rules that we're going to be, forced to follow in high school and in elementary school, they're not the rules that comply to everyday life. You're going to be judged by the way you dress outside of school. So trying to eliminate that in schooling systems now, to me, just seems kind of mediocre, and it just seems kind of a way for educators to, inflict even more rules upon students that's just unnecessary. So I'm going to conclude by just reminding you of that quote of Ansel Adams, how he says that it's all about expressing yourself in a creative spirit, and enforcing the dress code rule in schools would just completely eliminate that creative spirit that every child has. And I explained my opinion by using the 3 main points that I gave you, and I gave you some percentages of schools that issue school uniforms. I told you a few pros and cons in the public eye of the school uniforms, and lastly by giving you my personal opinion of why I think school uniforms should be eliminated. Thank you.